the SmallmouthCrush podcast. If you're a hardcore angler, you've come to the right place. This is a weekly podcast that will interview some of the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America. Travis and his guest will discuss what it takes to consistently catch big smallmouth, and you'll get a glimpse inside the mind of a trophy smallmouth angler. And now, here's your host of the SmallmouthCrush podcast, Travis Manson.
Hello, welcome to the SmallmouthCrush podcast. My name is Travis Manson. Another unbelievable week talking smallmouth fishing. I'm ready. It's been a week. I hope you guys are loving this podcast. We're talking with some of the greatest smallmouth bass anglers across the country and learning a ton along the way. At least I know I am, and I hope everybody out there appreciates this valuable information. We got a great guest tonight, Michael Simonton. He is a smallmouth stud. He knows how to put some big smallmouth in the boat. And I think he likes to fish Lake Erie quite a bit. So all you Lake Erie listeners want to learn big water smallmouth techniques, I think this is going to be a good one. But let's talk about the Reel Shot real quick. Easy to shop website will make selecting baits for your next tournament or maybe big bass adventure super, super easy. They carry all the name brands and some hard to find brands. You're going to find your Mega Bass, Jackals, Evergreen, Z-Man, of course, Dirty Jigs, Kitex, all kinds of rods and reels, Daiwa, Shimano, you name it, St. Croix. You get the picture. Head on over to the realshot.com. You can use my code SmallmouthCrush15, and that's going to give you 15% off your first order. So head on over, tell them Smallmouth Crush sent you. And let's get into it. Let's talk smallmouth fishing with Michael. And here he is. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you, man?
Oh, can't complain, Loving it.
We are hopefully going to share some things that have been helpful for me out on the water. And hopefully you can share some important little details too that I can use out on the water.
Well, I think both of us here are going to be able to drop some knowledge on the listeners and the viewers. Of course, this is on all the podcast networks as well as my YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. If you are watching, we do want to make sure we got the video going for this great content as well. But Michael, I want to start out with just introduce yourself if you could. Let us know what part of the country you're from as far as your home body of water. And I'd like to know really how you got into fishing, if this was something you've done all your life or if this is something, you picked up through the years.
So I'm from Northern Ohio, small town called Fremont. So it's just where the Sandusky River meets Sandusky Bay. Joined a bass club when I was 16 years old, and we just fished up around, Port Clinton, Sandusky, Ohio area. And I think, a lot of guys, I'm 40, a bunch of guys my age and a little bit older, seeing the Bassmasters on TV, something just clicked in us where we just thought that was our thing. That was awesome. It wasn't basketball for me, anything like that. So got into a bass club, and it just kind of rolled into that for, the competition. I played soccer, a bunch of other sports. That all ended. So the fishing really, the competition side really helped fill that void for competition. My grandmother had a cottage on one of the islands on Lake Erie called South Bass, Putin Bay. I think 3 or 4 days after being born, my parents had me over there. So I've been around the islands and Lake Erie my whole life. From my house in Fremont, we're not like Port Clinton right on the water, but I could be from Fremont to Port Clinton at the time, in about half hour. Now I lived just east of Sandusky, in a little town called Berlin Heights. And now I can get out to the Bass Islands, be fishing in about 40 minutes. So I'm under an hour. We have some great fishing around here. Started off doing a lot of largemouth fishing. My whole goal, my whole life was to become a professional bass fisherman. That's all I wanted to do. You and I actually, back then we didn't know each other, but that first year you fished the Opens, I think it was 2010 or 11, and you qualified that year, I think.
Yeah,
and I just missed out and was an alternate, but made it the next year, won the Northern Points, and quit my job. I'm a school teacher, was a school teacher, quit my job. And, you know, we were down in St. John's River and then March. Did that for 3 years on the elites, wasn't very successful. So got out, went back to teaching. And during around that time, I started a guide business, and I was kind of frustrated at the time. My whole life was become a better fisherman, to be a touring angler. Like, I just love the lifestyle, the traveling, different towns, different lakes, campgrounds, everything about it. So I was kind of, I mean, I wasn't depressed or anything like that. I was okay up here, but I wanted to know what I was going to do with my, like, I felt like I had a skill set in fishing, and I wanted to know what I wanted to do. And I was wondering if that passion was going to leave me. Like, I was curious, since that dream is over, most likely, I mean, someday I could go do it again, I guess, but if I got that burning desire. But I was really curious on how I was going to react to not chasing that dream anymore of qualifying for the elites. And I wanted, like, it was a real change for me to not have that, always driving after something. But then I was like, man, I really like guiding a lot, you know? So I was like, that was going to be my focus, you know, tracking the smallmouth out on Lake Erie, you know, more than I ever have. And so I put a lot of my emphasis in that. I really haven't fished a whole lot of tournaments since I got out. Fish a couple a year. You know, I got a buddy that I fish him with. But I really took the guiding really serious. And it was more the style that we fish. We're the casting and retrieving baits, working baits across the bottom, not the traditional out on Lake Erie, you know, the drifting and dragging tubes across the bottom. You know, that's kind of famous around, you know, in the Western Basin. You know, I guess some guys doing the St. Lawrence River, you know, in that deeper water. But so I wanted to show people the way we teach, or, you know, the way we fish. And I got a lot of walleye guys that started going with me, and they were shocked at how much fun it is, because they've gone out with guys that troll, and now they feel like they're doing the fishing, they're doing the catching. I'm not trying to make fun of the walleye guys that troll, but those customer base, it was something new to them, you know, and it really opened up their eyes, and it's really turned into a, you know, I guide probably 50 to 60 days a year. And I've really opened up the, you know, some eyes to people how to bass fish and how much fun it is. And this kind of took me by surprise. I didn't realize that a lot of my customers were going to become friends. Like, I have a lot of people that I don't call them customers anymore. They're almost friends, and it gets weird that after the fishing trip that they give you money, taking it all fishing. But they all understand it's part of the gig. I mean, you know, if I have to do it for part of my business. So the tournament bug is definitely getting back into it. I've been listening to some podcasts lately, and but now that I've got the, and I'm sure you've gone through it in your head and talked to your close buddies about it. When you get out and you get a clear head, like when I first got out, I didn't have a clear head. If I would have got back in it, like would have qualified the next year, I would have been just as much of a mess on the tour. And I probably would have been just as unsuccessful. But now that I've been out 5 or 6 years, I have a clear head. I think I probably would have. I would do a little better. That curiosity part really gets me wondering. But it's a heck of a gamble.
It is. I have that thought too. You know, after I was in the same situation you were, we just kind of ran out of money, $100,000 a year to fish on tour.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
I lasted 2 years. And it was, it was a shock, wondering what are you going to do next, because that's all you thought about. And so you bring up a really good point. I think, you know, we both kind of gravitated towards guiding and still staying in the fishing industry somehow. But that drive to get back, it's definitely there for me. But the passion that, and maybe this is better, you know, that driving real, like, keep you up at night, that's not there. And so that's scary for me too, because I'm thinking about trying to get back in. But, you know, I'm thinking of all these other individuals across the country that, you know, whether they be young anglers coming up through the ranks, or maybe a veteran that just wants to, you know, that always wanted to fish professionally on one of the major tours. They got that, like, can't sleep at night, focused, driven attitude, which I don't seem to have. But I want to be there. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense to me, but I think of it this way. It's all up here. so much of it. I'm thinking like 80, 90, 95%, somewhere in that frame of what goes on out there. I mean, I would think that I think we would make better decisions. And because of those decisions, we could do better than those younger kids that don't. I mean, I was that kid that couldn't sleep or I wasn't a kid at the time. I was like 28 or 29 when I got in or no, I was 30, 31 or whatever. But
yeah.
I mean, I couldn't sleep. I was wondering, I was like, man, what is wrong with me? And you just get so balled up. But there's just so many times in tournaments, and I won't go on this, we'll get to smallmouth talking here, but think of how many times you like, all right, me personally, like I was just a moron. One of my strategies to go into these tournaments, I love throwing a frog so much, when I largemouth fish. I mean, but I would have 3 good fish in the boat, and I would continue to go. Like I would never bail and say, all right, just pick up the drop shot, the shaky head, go hit some points, and go catch some 13 inchers and get out of here. And I look back at the results about, how many tournaments I would miss a check by a pound or 2, and I would weigh in 3 fish on one day or 4 the next. And I mean, come on, what is that?
Yeah,
it's nuts, right?
Yes, it's I just consider it an expensive, a learning curve, expensive learning curve, really is what it was.
It was something, but
we may get back there someday.
Yeah.
But who knows? But obviously, your passion now, guiding on Lake Erie. You have a successful business. I imagine a lot of that guiding's done in the off season for you as a teacher during the summer months, and then probably the weekends.
Yeah, that's correct. So usually my school district gets out first week of June, maybe early part of the second week. But up until then, I do weekends in April and May. And then in May, I'll do a couple trips after school, like a 4 or 5 hour trip. So that's kind of how I roll. And then once school gets out, I'm usually until about the second week of July, I'm pretty much every day until but you get low days where you don't get out. And so there's days off work their way in.
Well, talk to me about that, because I know there's probably a lot of people that maybe have been on Lake Erie in the past or thinking about coming up in that Sandusky area all the way, the islands and Pelee into Canada, that whole section of Lake Erie. Well, first of all, every section of Lake Erie seems to fish a little bit different, but that section of Lake Erie, you have the opportunity to catch both good largemouth and smallmouth. And you just mentioned with the winds and things like that come up, when you got a guy that, maybe drove 5-6 hours to go out and fish with you and it's blowing and he wants to go catch smallmouth, you got some options for those people up there?
You do. And whether it's in the boat or I talk to them and I just say, listen, I've never met you before. This is our first trip together. I don't want to insult your fishing IQ, but I kind of want to know if they can use a bait caster, how well they can cast a spinning rod, because if it's blowing real hard, we're going to, I got some frog and fish going in some of the bays or whatever. I mean, it's not very fun to go throwing a frog when there's, when the frog's blowing across the mats, or you got to flip in some pads. And so then there's a bunch of canals in the harbors and you got to work our way back there. But if you can't put the jig or whatever you're throwing up next to the pole, it might not be a good option for them to even make the drive over here. So I try to just I have learned this, and it's, the more honest you can be with your customers, the better off everybody's going to be. And to be, and by just asking more questions and finding more about them, because I have assumed that people early on in my guiding that people could cast a bait caster and make a pitch up next to a dock that we can just do with ease. You know what I mean? And not everybody can do that. So, asking those questions up front, it just makes everything so much smoother. And I mean, the last thing I want to do, whether they're coming from Columbus or east of Cleveland or wherever, I don't want anybody getting up at 3 or coming the night before and then just having a miserable trip. So, and then I even ask them questions about what they think of rough water. I don't like to take the guys out and have them fishing in 3-footers. I mean, 3-footers aren't fun to fish in, no matter if you're by yourself. You know what I mean? So we always fish on the calm side of the islands. But if they're like, I am not a big water guy, I'm like, well, the winds are not looking like it's a day for you. And if I have a day open, we just push them more. But a lot of times, they just book for the following year.
Right. So, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, talk to me a little bit about the smallmouth fishing on Erie. You grew up doing it. How have you seen the fishing change over the years?
Yeah. So being in the club, we had a few tournaments out there every year, and but as my tournament life got rolling, I really focused more on largemouths, and then once that kind of got a bigger boat and started going out there more, smallmouth started becoming more important in my life, and I really like getting away from people. Like I'm kind of beyond the point of going in the harbors and just going around the circles. I don't know what, if it's being a teacher, being around tons of people all day long. I just like to get away.
Mm-hmm.
But Erie got really, really tough. Like, in the mid 90s, it was just like, there was tons of 3-pounders, early, turn of the century, it was just awesome. And then when the gobies came in, I mean, so the word is the gobies came in, and they just exploded. The biologists say that was a major problem. And then the walleye fishing took a real tank. And then I guess a lot of charter captains started going after walleye or going after bass, and I guess they kept them. So between those two kind of hitting at the same time, and that was about 2007, 8, 9 in that area. I mean, you would go fishing all day long to your best stuff, and you might catch 5 fish. Really? And I was like I'm good friends with, I'm not going to like just throw names out, but I'm really good friends with Joe Baylog. And he was out there all the time, and he was very generous with techniques and things he would use out there. So, and his buddies were all, in the network of the tournament guys. And I mean, it was just tough. I mean, it was very, very tough out there. And then, fishing out there now it's slowly, like I'm starting to use the words, it's getting back to where it was. It's not to where it was in the late 90s in that time frame, but I think it could. There was there was a closed season catch and release that was put in place. I don't know what year it is, but I think that helped a lot with with the fishing. Now they just put in, you can keep, I don't know what now you can keep an 18-incher, and that's your trophy between May 1st and June 28th or whatever. So if you can keep one fish 18 inches and over, and they call that a trophy. And it's a great fish. It's a fun fish for a customer. But everybody I talk to says, man, it's not even that big of a fish. So right. I hope a bunch of 18 inches don't start being pulled out. And the gobies, I'm kind of getting tired of the goby talk. I mean, are you getting tired of the goby talk? Everybody keeps talking gobies. And
well, what do you mean?
Like gobies are important, but like the goby population is like way down. I've gone to some seminars where the biologists have spoke, and in their creel nets, they're not getting as much as what they were. And I'm catching so many fish out of Lake Erie now. It's like just fouling around, waiting for balls of bait to come underneath your boat and dropping on them and catching them. And they're spitting up little perch, white perch, yellow perch. They're spitting up baby walleyes. I mean, a lot. I'm seeing, because there's so many walleye out now. It's like the best walleye fishing, I guess, of years and years. And there's tons of little walleye out there, like the size of a pencil or smaller. And I'm getting a lot of bass to spit up walleye.
Really? So they're targeting small, I guess, 1 or 2 year old perch, walleyes.
Yeah, little white perch. I mean, they're still eating. I mean, they're still definitely eating. Like, I'm not saying they're not eating goby. They are definitely eating gobies, but it's not like that goby boom that we all made, the Great Lakes popular.
Those schools that you're seeing of bait fish, is there also like a shad population, alewives, or what else is going on?
Gizzard shad are booming right now on the lake.
Okay.
Walleye are eating them, and I've talked to a couple of buddies. I mean, they're pulling full like hand size gizzard shad with pliers out of smallmouth's throats, like you would see coming out of a Kentucky lake bass.
So are they starting to roam more?
Yeah, I think they are. Spring, you'll see them more. Late spring, when they get off, most of them are done bedding. They'll kind of stay shallow for a few more weeks. They're real easy to catch. There'll be multiple times, back to the gobies real quick. They'll just start just throwing up gobies that are 2 inches long. Like, you'll see 8, 9 gobies just all spit up there. But I'm seeing more of the the bait fish, whether it's the little walleyes, either of the perch, yellow or white perch. Kind of like definitely everything's post spawn, and they're starting to move off. But like a lot of the times, when I'm out there fishing, and pretty much the shallow stuff, and I'll just say shallow stuff's 15 foot or less, is pretty much done with. You'll get into your areas where they used to hold on these rocks, and you might catch one real quick. It seems like always first 5 minutes or first cast, usually, you throw right to the juice and you catch them right away.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't catch anymore. And then you just start milling around from waypoint to waypoint in a small area. And then you just start seeing these balls of bait that start popping up, and they're about the size of your boat, and I don't even mark any fish underneath them, but I just drop my bait on them and I catch one. Really? And then I just sit around that area and I just keep plunking them off like that. So I think there's more fish now on the western basin of Lake Erie, maybe up in the water column now, roaming with the fish, maybe even with the walleye, than what they were in the past.
So you're really good. I'm assuming you're really good with your electronics when it comes to finding these roaming fish. There's a lot of different species in Lake Erie. Of course, the sheephead, drum, walleye, and then the bass. Are you able to determine really what type of fish that is when you do see them on the graph or not?
So I think I use a graph pretty effectively. I would not say I'm like a Paul Mueller or one of those guys, not even close. And I'm a very impatient fisherman, so I get in the area where there's rocks. I can't tell if it's a bass or not. I'm looking for a fish, looking for around the rocks. If I see a fish that looks like it's right on the side of the rock or maybe hovering a foot above it, I'm thinking it's a good chance it's a bass. But it could be, it seems like the sheephead are more definitely on the bottom tight. But if I see that and I see some bait in the area, it gives me some confidence. But if I'm not getting bit in 15 minutes, I'm rolling on to the next waypoint. And even for my guide trips, most of my customers do 6-hour trips. And, a big thing around there, I've got so many waypoints, I kind of just roll through them. And through the years, I've kind of got a system where I know the times of the day that the fish bite the best, and being out there every day, that's huge, being out there every day, really seeing what areas the fish are starting to leave at, where some new groups of fish are coming in at. But, when they start pushing off, and I'm looking for those balls of bait, if I mark them, it gives me some confidence and I see the bait. Yeah, but I'm definitely not even fun fishing. We're going to give it 15 minutes and then we're probably going to be moving.
So
just because go ahead.
What would be the bait of choice or technique when you are, sitting on the ball of bait fish and you mark them, but you might not have marked fish, but you say sometimes you can drop down, one will magically appear. There might be a handful around. What's the technique that your go-to in those situations?
Yeah, drop shot pretty much. The Z2 is awesome bait on Lake Erie. I used to like the Berkeley Gulp Fry was awesome. I started my own little lure business called Venture Lures. Like a bunch of little stupid little baits. They work really well. I think there's certain properties in a bait that work real well. And I think you sound like you're a total tackle junkie. So you have probably ran the mill of baits that you've tried for drop shots, and you've probably got 10 that you would feel confident using on a tournament day. And you probably have 10 more baits that look great that are just junk, that you're like, man, I cannot believe this bait doesn't work. There's something about it that I think if you play with these baits and you feel them and you watch them in the water, they have very similar traits that make them good fish catching baits, I think. So I think and for me, unless you're going with an Erie darter, which is a heavier plastic with salt, and if you ever looked at it on your line, it's an awesome bait out there, but it like falls down and it's so heavy and it looks ridiculous. But they say it looks like a perch, but to me, like a plastic that floats. Okay, but the floating, they kind of go like this, which makes it look unnatural to me. But some sort of floating and it's soft and they don't last long. Those are the ones that are the best. That's kind of a rule I go with. And you get your basics, like a green pumpkin with some sort of purple, gold, like that Z2, and the smoky shad's a good one, that color. But I think everybody's pretty much using the same stuff anymore. Guys that are somewhat in the know.
Yeah, for the most part, I think that's certainly what's going on when it comes to bait selection. There's a handful of good ones out there, and there's, like you said, there's a handful that you just wonder why you can't get more bites on that bait. But who really knows? There's a lot that to be said about being able to watch your bait. I do a lot of testing in the fish tank, and I'm sure you have too. And I know you've even taken a step further and did a little scuba diving on some of the smallmouth structure. So I do want to talk about that. But before we go there, I'm real curious before we leave these bait fish oriented smallmouth, do you see a difference as far as how they suspend based on the wind conditions? So if you have a real calm day, do you notice any difference on how those fish react to the bait fish in the water column versus a day when it's blowing really hard?
Yeah, to me, I see, and I've been out there diving slick sunny days, and to me they tend to suspend even 3-4 foot up into the water, maybe 5 foot
on those calm days.
Yeah, on those calm days.
Agree. Yep.
And sometimes I feel like I'm getting onto something where the suspended fish don't bother me as much, but man, it's some days. I don't know. Fishing's such a crazy. That's half the reason I like it. You think you get it dialed in, you're like so pumped to go back out there again, and it's like, wow, that's out the window. That's not the deal. I thought I was on something, but you think, who knows? There's so many factors with fishing. Like, did the bait get out of the area, and that's why they're not, and when they got hunkered down on the rocks now, So, but yeah,
it's hard to keep track of those fish when they are chasing those schooling bay fish. The reason why I asked that is I had one of my best days last year on Lake Ontario in about 35 feet of water, and those fish were down 15 feet. And it was an amazing day. I was by myself, just me and the fish. And dude, I could never get on that deal for the remainder of the year. That was it. One and done.
I hate to. I mean, you're probably thinking the same thing. That might be like a 1 or 2 time lifetime deal. I mean, that seems like kind of special. Like 15 foot, that's like a super suspended deal.
Crazy.
You could have hit the perfect storm type of thing.
I thought I was going to crush them all year doing
that.
Like, it was a finesse technique where it was a small 16th ounce jig head with a real small, fluke type of bait, and just shaking it like 15 feet down. You just they were everywhere, dude. Like,
and you're probably like, I don't even know if I'm going to tell my buddies. I'll tell a couple. Probably.
No, I was, dude. I was on the phone. With my buddies all day because I was like,
yeah,
this is crazy. And at the time, I didn't make a video of it because, I was obviously Live Scope was helping, and last year I was very protective about it just because I didn't want my competitors to get it. But now everybody's got the stuff. And so, I kind of lost the opportunity to really showcase how special those electronics were. And then, of course, add it to the bait I was using was somewhat unique. Give you a little hint. Paul Mueller throws it a lot.
Yeah.
But it was a very cool situation. But anyways,
vertical, straight up and down.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It sounds like almost like what those guys in Oklahoma with the crappie fish and with the, with the Panoptics scanning until they find them and, dropping the bait, or I don't know what Matt does, but
Yep. So tell me about the scuba diving. Like, how long? What got you into that? Was it to specifically check out fish structure and what goes on?
Yeah, it was specifically to get underneath the water and stare at the fish. It's the cameras are cool, but it's still so different because I imagine you play with cameras. You got the waves, and you can never get a great picture. But when you get down there, it's definitely learned. So like with the algae blooms on Lake Erie, and I don't know if this is true, but there's some areas that are notorious. I've caught up, consistently caught bass off of over the years, and now I can't catch a fish off of. And I talked to another buddy, and he's kind of experienced the same thing. So I dove on one of those spots. It's out of North Bass, and went right down, and it's like 19, 20 foot of water, and it's right on my numbers. I went to it, and it's got this like hard blanket of like carpet the foam stuff, and I don't know if that's like the algae as it dies, it goes down there and just covers the rocks, and compacts it. But
I'm shocked right now. You're talking about foam and rocks on the bottom and algae.
I don't know if it is. I'm just saying that I've learned. I guess
It's a
again,
different bottom than what you expected.
yeah, I feel like some rocky areas are not rocky anymore, and it's not. I mean, most of our rocky areas are still rock, but there's some areas that had a big rock and some boulders, and then there's a groove from the glaciers, and now it's got this soft foamy stuff
blanketed over by perhaps the algae that's dying
possibly,
and decaying.
Yeah, or maybe
something.
the current shifted and some sediments got rolled into there and covered it all up. But that's kind of, scuba diving showed me that. But the coolest thing is when they're spawning. I go into the areas where they spawn, and I've learned that to me, you got your areas where they're spawning. You can roll a swim bait through there, and it's just easy, or tube, whatever. When you catch a lot of threes, catching some fours, maybe catch a big one, like a 5 or whatever. But what I've noticed is that you get into some of these areas that are a little bit away from the larger spawning areas, and you find a couple giant rocks. And I have seen some of the bigger fish, the bigger ones in the 4s and the 5s, all by themselves, next to these rocks, these giant rocks. There's a shipwreck at one of the islands, and there was this monster tucked up underneath the shipwreck, like almost in this like cavern area. Oh. I got him on film with my camera. I'll have to email you some of the stuff.
Sure.
And he came out from the shipwreck, bit my camera, and then raced back in. Just stuff like that. So I think there's some real tricky spots where some of these larger fish, spawn at. Area with the winds down here in the shallow water. Some days it gets turned up, and you need to see some good scuba diving water. You need 7, 8, 10 foot of visibility to be like, wow, this is cool.
Could you bring the equipment and I would actually be able to scuba dive that day? Is it something you can pick up and learn quick?
It's so easy. Like, all you do is you put this, the breather in your mouth, and you learn how to use the regulators to, put air in your tank and some basic breathing things. But yeah, it's
that's cool. For example, you'll go out to a shipwreck and take a look at that. What describe like a shipwreck on Lake Erie, because there's a lot of shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. And, obviously it depends on the year the ship went down. There's ships from the 1800s and ships from the 1920s and 70s. So a variety of different ships. Some are more wood and some are more steel, I would imagine. What is a ship, what is a big, I don't know, tugboat or a metal piece of equipment that's down there? What does it look like? Is it covered up by zebra mussels? Is there, what's it typically? Because when I fish a lot of this, just man-made structure, I call it, you get to some of that real gnarly stuff, man. Sometimes it's a gamble whether or not you're gonna get a bite, but are you gonna be able to pull them out of that stuff?
Yeah. There's a real famous one on the east side of Kelly's Island. It's up in like 15 foot of water, and the water on Lake Erie is a little high right now, but they got some buoys marking it, so boaters who don't have chips can stay clear of it. I'm not sure if they know what those buoys are marking, but and there's a part of it that comes down about 3-4 foot of the surface, so it's pretty close. But once you dive on it, you get under the water, and you're kind of just, the first time you're like, man, that is awesome. But then it kind of like, you see some small bass and some rock bass swimming around, and as you start moving around, you might, and depends on when you're there. If it's May, you'll find a bunch of different size of fish there, but it's just kind of this big orange and brown glob of metal sitting there, and you see and you see some poles coming down, you see some beams coming up. So it's not an old wooden one. But there was some wooden beams on it, but it's just this old gnarly zebra slime coated ship down there. And you can definitely see there's some deep shipwrecks out in area, tons of them. And you can definitely see, like, if you were to cast at a distance to it and you can barely bring your bait over top of it, whether it's a tube or a drop shot, you just almost get hung. And it makes totally sense why, because if you pull it over this cable and then you open your bail, it'll fall back down again, and it gets somewhere crazy, and all these crevices. I would assume the best way to fish a shipwreck effectively would be almost vertical, where you could kind of, pitch it out and work it through these different sections of it.
We hear a lot about that technique in the past. Is fishing shipwrecks on Erie still a viable way to do well in tournaments?
I would assume so. I mean, there's some out in Canada that, were notoriously well or really good for a few guys. I don't fish them. I've tried. You got to be, well, a spot lock would definitely help much more now, but they're kind of a pain in the butt. You know what I mean? So,
oh, absolutely.
So I get frustrated I can get pretty frustrated on the lake if it's blowing and things aren't going well. So I try to reduce my frustration levels. Staying away from shipwrecks is one of those.
What do you think your I guess your strength is when it comes to fishing for smallmouth, whether it be a technique or maybe locating fish? What do you rely on?
Side imaging was the number one thing that helped me skyrocketed my ability to go out and catch smallmouth. 4 women, the old sonars, straight up and down, 2D. I didn't know what I was looking at. I mean, literally. I would talk to my buddy. I'm like, dude, you have got me lost. And I would kind of just drift a little bit, catch a fish, throw a buoy, cast around, and that's just my routine. You know what I mean? But side imaging, it showed me how big some spots are now. And that has really been the number one tool for helping me locate fish. But then as far as baits, I really like catching them on jerk baits. I mean, some days I feel like I could just do it all year, but the window on Lake Erie, Western Basin, is pretty small for me for throwing jerk baits. You got, for me, 3rd, 4th week of April, first 2 weekends of May, and it's pretty close to being done. I mean, you could catch them, but you got to work. But then once they start, finishing up spawning, there's different groups of fish that move in for spawning, but throwing a crankbait mid-depth, 10, 12 foot, I absolutely love. Like I have got other fishing by myself. Like I'll just chase a crankbait bite because I know it's happening somewhere at some depth and I can't get it going.
Is that typically a year-round deal, cranking?
No. Usually for me, I stopped doing it, first week of July, something like that.
What is your crankbait of choice?
I like to rotate through quite a few. The Strike Kings series, 3s and 4s are good. I like the DT and that perch color, that 10. The Normans get their deep little lens. I was throwing that it's a popular one over this way, that Sea Flash. It's a balsa bait. But those 4, Berkeley's Dredger, that small one that goes down to 10 foot. It's got a real small body and it casts like a bullet. So I kind of use them all. I think if there's a good crankbait bite going on, I probably wouldn't have all Strike Kings on. I like to fish through an area with different baits, different action.
Okay, so you'll go through a section, catch a few fish, and then show them something different.
Yeah, line size. I like a graphite rod for them. I feel like the sensitivity and a little bit stiffer graphite. Crankbait rod is what I like. 12-pound fluoro, and I really big into covering water, like a long cast, probably almost burning it. Like if you were to burn a spinnerbait, I'm bringing it back like this and stopping it, and it's definitely work. But I think with that clear water, you can get some of those fish that don't want to react. Just because of smallmouth mentality, the way they are, you can get some of those fish to bite. And I lose some because of that. They're not rarely. I get on the bites where the fish are sideways in their mouth, and it's great. And you can feel them that their fish has got the bait sideways just by the way they're reeling them in. You feel that more of a thicker weight coming in. But a lot of times when you're speed reeling like that and they're not in that mood to eat, there's one hook in their mouth, and for a tournament time, I'd like to maybe find them real quick with the crankbait for the tournament, and probably not sure if I'd gamble on getting them in the boat. I'd probably want to slow down with the Ned rig or something that's a more high percentage bait.
After that, kind of July-ish, you're really relying on the drop shotting. Typical setup on Lake Erie, what does that look like?
18 inches, most time. Man, I've been playing with going up to like 2 and 3 foot. That's something I want to start doing more of, is expanding that based off of what our talking earlier about the fish suspending more. A lot of, I'm diving out there. I've seen, I've gone out to the islands in Canada, and dove out there. And it's cool. You get to the bottom and it's like, man, I'm all by myself. This is kind of wicked. And then you start going to where you think your rocks are at. And then you kind of check out what's going on. And all of a sudden you turn around, there's 6 smallies swimming with you like your buddies, and you're all heading to the park to play. Right. And then so I sit there and I just watch them, and they're just all swimming around like in a big aquarium. And I'm kind of wondering, are they up because I'm up? But I'm marking those fish at that same depth. You know what I mean? So I think that's where they're just hanging out. And like we said earlier, that was a sunny day, and they, like to suspend it, I think, in that 4 or 5 foot range. And they'll have, these were just giant rocks, like the size of like a big, decent sized rock out there, that I like to fish is, the size of a lawn tractor, John Deere. So if I can get like 4 or 5 in those areas and 10, 15 boulders the size of basketballs mixed in with it, that's like, I just envision that's like their home base. That's their house. And everywhere around it is just like their big yard. And they kind of go exploring around, but it seems like they always come back to that house where they live, So, one cool thing that I've learned through guiding, through retying baits or whatever, if you're fishing a spot like that, a specific spot with some rocks, and they stop biting, and the wind kind of rolls you off those rocks, and all of a sudden you start getting bit, and it's just bare, like nothing. I think those fish have pushed off because of the pressure of that, of the boat being so close to them for a while. And now they're just kind of hanging out there out in their yard, like I called it earlier, until the pressure leaves, and then they'll kind of push back up a little bit.
It's interesting you say that, because when you're really intimate, I guess you could say, with a spot, and I can picture a few of those situations in my mind where you might have a rock boulder and we'll catch some fish off of it. They'll get smart. And in fact, it's a shallower spot than I'm thinking of in my head. They see you, you see them, and they like to kind of scoot out, and they, in their yard, like you were saying, they're going to head. But to me, they always go to the same part of that yard, which is a bare spot as well. Well, there's nothing else around this boulder, but they don't go this way or 40 yards that way. I tell my clients, okay, well, the school's broken up. They're 30 yards this way, and they're always there. It's crazy.
So, and when that happens, and I totally agree with what you just said, is this, and so then last year I kind of re-rigged my depth finders. So I had 2 up front, 1 up front, and I was sharing it with my console on my driver's seat. So that my customers in the back of the boat, I could see what they were seeing, and I could say, hey, there's fish underneath you. When that way they wouldn't have to be constantly staring at the graph. I could say there's fish underneath you. And I said, you got to drop it right next to the engine, because that's the closest spot where the fish was. And so there's a little learning curve. They would reel up real fast, and then they would toss the bait like, I'm like, no, it's got to be right there.
Sure.
The fish is not over there. But once they get it all, and it's really cool to see them all, it all start to connect with them, and they start to get it. And usually by that time they really get it down, unfortunately it's time to get back to the ramp.
Right. Well, if you're not used to fishing big water, I would suggest hooking up with someone like Michael that has the experience, that'll really shorten your learning curve out there. There's so much that goes into it. I could literally talk for 2 hours just about drop shot weights. You know what I mean? There's so many different scenarios when it comes to fishing deep water.
Real quick.
Yes.
What's your number one size of drop shot weight? Like if you could ever just go all year, if you could only take one size.
Oh, you're asking me these tough questions.
Yeah, man.
If I can only have one?
Yeah.
Well,
you have to use it shallow, and you can't cut it in half or snip it off like
3/8.
All right, me too. That's what I was wondering.
But I have a 5/8 on most of the time.
Oh, okay.
I like to get down quick for deep water, not shallow.
Right.
Now I'm supposed to ask you that question. I got to ask you this, because we try to ask this with every guest on the podcast. If you had one bait that you could use the rest of your life, what would that be for smallmouth?
It'd probably have to be a tube.
A tube.
Just, I like to crack a tube, and come a real fidgety fisherman, and that would give my cranking, my jerkbait, kick in to really snap it hard. And I do, but I think it would just have to be.
And then what color?
Probably dark melon or green pumpkin, purple, green pumpkin, purple gold, something like that.
Yep. Let's talk about tube fishing real quick, because it's not as simple as some people think, and it's not as complicated either as some people might think. But when you mention cracking a tube, that
Mhm.
in some people's mind, I think they're not quite sure what that means, because I think everyone might have a different vision of how much movement or how you do that. First of all, I want to know exactly what you mean by that. And second of all, I want to know, when does that benefit over, say, just dragging a tube?
Yeah, so if I kind of fish it where I, have a group of fish located in a maybe like a smaller area, well, I can use both different ways. Big area, big flat, where I know there's a bunch of fish just scattered, a bunch of different ways, or a small specific spot where but they're not biting. So, and I like to make it just a giant cast. So most time I'm using a spinning rod, 7.5 foot, fairly long handle on it, so I can really bury that that rod. 8 pound straight fluorocarbon is what I like to use. I don't like to snap a tube with braid on it. I like that stretch from the fluorocarbon.
Okay.
Most time I'm using a 1/2 ounce. And then I like to just literally heave the bait as far as I can possibly get it, and it looks like you're trying to work out a rat's nest on a bait caster.
Mhm.
And, you got to figure out what depth. I like to crack it in 15 foot or less. Most time because I'm too impatient to wait for it to get down in 20 or 25. But once it gets to the bottom, customers don't understand this. Is if they're going to do that with me, is that, and they're like, when's the bait on the bottom? The bait's on the bottom usually when the the line stops falling and you see the rainbow. I say look at the reverse rainbow. And then once your line's laying on the water, that's when most time your baits hit the bottom. So close the bait, your bail by hand. And then I just started going like this, 3 times super hard.
Really?
And then usually I'll let it sit for a second, and then I'll do it one more time. And then and it's still way out there. And then I just reel it back in. And I don't even keep snapping it all the way back to the boat. And the reason I do that is most time when I'm snapping a tube like that, it seems like they bite on the initial fall, almost like when a puncher's flipping a mat and the weight goes through the mat. Everybody, it's an awesome way to catch them. They say 90% of the time that hits on that initial fall. My experience, the way I do it, on that initial fall, when that tube hits the bottom and I go to snap it, usually on the first or second snap, he's already on it. For me.
All right, so let's walk this through in my head. You're out there 15 feet of water or less, and what are you? Maybe a flat or I guess anything that's holding fish.
Yeah.
Long cast. As soon as it hits the bottom,
I like to do it as soon as it hits the bottom.
As soon as it hits the bottom, you're cracking it 3 times.
I like to go 3 times, but usually
and the rod tip is pointed sideways up or straight up?
Yeah, it's about 11 o'clock between, around that 11 o'clock. And so I'll go so about 11 o'clock. And I'll go like this 3 times. And
Three quick.
3 quick, but usually they're on it on this first or second crack.
So they're biting it as you're.
I think they're seeing it fall to the bottom, is what I think.
Okay.
I think the bait's coming down the bottom super fast. More.
Well, 3 quick, that thing's just it's shooting up, and then that's quick, and they're just grabbing it. And then so after 3, then it was a pause.
And then I'll do it again, maybe not. I'll just do it one more time, not 3 times, just literally one more time.
And then you're reeling it back
in. I reel it all the way back in. The only reason I do that is there's so many times, and all the other smallmouth guys that do it will probably he's nuts, he's missing some fish. But I have stroked it all the way back to the boat, and I seem to only catch them 25% of the time. And so I feel like that's just wasting my time. If more casts I can make and get them to probably bite it on that fall or on that second crack, if I can make 15 more casts than you, I have the chance to catch maybe 3 or 4 or 5 more fish, I'm thinking.
So they probably saw that bait on the initial drop, and then by the time they reacted and got over to it, they're biting on that second or third crack.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like, with a 7.5 foot, fast action rod, I hardly ever lose them that way. cracking. I don't know what it is. A real good hook to use that I love to crack with is that Gamakatsu O'Shaughnessy. That Sprout style hook. It's gold. For some reason, that when that hook rotates, like with a round bend, the rotation of that hook goes more, and it seems like to pop out more. That hook rotates, and that tip of the hook, I think, will come back and hit the fish more to stop that rotating more. And that's why that's a really good hook. For a heavy ounce, you would think with a hook, a half ounce weight, it'd be one that you would lose a lot of fish on. But
are you pouring your own tubes, or are you finding that hook? Is that hook something that if people were interested, they can go find that somewhere?
I don't know of any companies. I'm working on one right now for my little company, to jerk tubes with. But normally I'm pouring my own right now, with a modified do it mold. I don't know of any companies that have that hook in a tube hook. A lot of the ones are, the 90-degree round bend, whether it's the Mustad or the Gamakatsu one, or the owner's got a good one. 20 years ago when I got in, there's only a select few good hooks. Now it feels like with everything, with electronics, rods, reels, everybody's got to have it good,
right?
Or they're not going to be around.
So listen, how can we get some of these hooks? Are they for sale? Are you going to sell them?
I am going to sell them, but it's all in the design stage right now.
Okay.
But it's going to be that hook, and the reason that hook's going to be really good is, I like to use the 3.5, but the heavy plastic, it's hard. You're trying to get the eye and your line to go through it. It's got where the line tie meets the 90-degree bend, it's longer. And so that's going to stick out of the plastic more. It's going to make it easier to tie. But it's going to be a heavy forward head, so the bait wants to go down more. I feel like sometimes with the normal ones that are more, the mold or, the lead goes down the shank of the body.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like those might want to fall a little bit horizontal more versus vertical. And I want to get that bait to fall more.
So
vertical.
a 3.5-inch tube is the size.
Yeah, that's what I like. Yeah, and I like whether it's Strike King is my tube that I like to use, and the reason I like that is I like a tube.
Tubes or
just the coffee tubes, but I like it. It doesn't even matter about the coffee. I don't really care about that. It's the way the body starts and the tail starts. It's like pretty much right in the middle, and they have a nice, where it's dipped, it's even. The tails are cut real nice. When you're stroking a tube, it drives me nuts. Is when you don't have a tube that where the tails are cut real nice, and it balls up around your tail.
Yes.
Around a hook, and you're constantly.
I can't. If I have sometimes depending on the I guess the plastic in the tube. There's some really good tubes out there that have really good action, but during the process of making those tubes, sometimes it's an uneven cut or whatever the case may be, and so I have to take the time to spread them out, and I do that. I want to make sure everything looks perfect.
It's crazy, but it's like super important when you're fishing a certain way. Like if you're going to just pull across the bottom, you're probably not going to have an issue with it. But as soon as you start popping it, those tails, they get wrapped around the inside of that bend of that hook, and that's just going to cause so much spiraling, in your line. And it seems like since you're fishing the tube so fast, I don't have a lot of issues with coiling.
You drag a tube on braid?
No. So
you're a fluorocarbon guy then, huh?
With my tube, like pretty much the only thing I'm using straight fluoro with these days is a tube.
This is critical because I'm trying to get this dialed in. So I'm looking for a 7.5. I'm getting some tube heads from you, no doubt.
Yep.
3.5-inch tube. And what size line fluorocarbon are you?
So I use 8, and I go with 8 because of the casting distance.
Sure.
I really want to bomb it out there to get because then, you're really reducing the spooking of the fish because you are bombing the bait out there. The fish don't even probably know you're there, and they're just getting plunked off a lot of times.
What's the shallowest you're going to crack a tube?
5 foot.
Are you using a half ounce even in 5 feet of water? Or are you ever going a little less?
I have gone to 3/8, but most time it's a half.
Stick with a half regardless.
Yeah. Because, the bait's not really being dragged across the bottom to get hung in, and all you're looking for is that reaction. I think sometimes we just need to make it a little bit more simple than what we
do. Seems like that half ounce is going to probably give you the right action in fall rate that you're looking for to trigger that reaction bite.
Yeah. But it's a fun way. You can catch as many doing that if they're really on it. As fast as you can cast them. And sometimes you wonder, like, man, how many fish are in there?
Wow.
So, but if you get the school kind of worked up, they'll bite anything at a certain point. once you get them going.
Wow,
Yeah.
this was Michael, this was good stuff, man. Loving it. Loving it. How can people, Michael, get a hold of you? What's the best way to follow you on social media?
I had a Facebook page for my guide service. It was the Simonton's Lake Erie Bass Fishing Guide Service. And I'm getting rid of that. I just kind of want to reduce my social media. Not a full-time guide. So I've got a lot of customers now that from previous years, I kind of take up all my days. So I kind of don't want to get bogged down with social media. I'm a school teacher, just had a son, have a little bait business. I don't want to have one more thing, but I do have a Instagram. It's MSimontonBass. Not very active. I'd like to start getting more active. My website's michaelsimonton.com. I am going to be starting to upload videos, side imaging and things on how I rig my boat. So if guys want to check that out, it's good to have guys like you to, have me on. And I really appreciate you, selecting me to be on this. I certainly don't consider myself a, top 50 smallmouth
That's what
angler.
everybody says.
I know, but
good
let's
sticks,
see,
man.
we are so,
Catch 'em.
but I am so looking at credentials, and I certainly don't have the credentials of top 10s like you and Scott on Lake Erie or on the Great Lakes. But I think I try to do best for my customers and clients and give them the best experience out there. And, they want to catch fish. That's real quick. Another thing I really learned about, all the hype from the Great Lakes, everybody has these big dreams of catching those awesome. And they do love it. But I've learned that people want to have someone that's nice out on the boat, give them a good experience, and they want to catch some fish, and teach them a few things. So I think I do a good job of that. I really appreciate having me on.
Yeah, definitely. So the bait, what plastics are you currently selling now? Is there some more baits in the lineup?
I got a new football head here.
Okay.
But I had them drill these little holes in the bottom of it to hold the powder paint in more. So pulling across the bottom, it starts breaking off. I'm thinking that's going to hold the powder paint on there, and it's got Gamagatu hook on it and double barb. I got these in a ball head. I sell a bunch. I just got some more in bags of my ball heads. So I got a new hook that I'm also going to be selling. Hayabusa's got a really good hook. This is the 1/8 ounce on it, and I got 1/8 ounce with up to 3/0, and I got 3/16 with a couple different sizes, 5/16, couple different sizes, 7/16, couple different size hooks. So I just got boxes like these laying all around with ball heads, with Hayabusas and the Gamis. Here's one that I call the Skinny Mini. This is smoked purple flake.
So a Skinny Mini, that resembles that's almost, that really is a good bait fish imitator, whether it be perch, shad, or a goby.
My favorite bait to use when I'm dropping on them, when I'm marking them on the graph, is the one I call the dropper. And it's a stupid looking bait. It's less than 3 inches long, soft plastic, and this is a green pumpkin purple flake. But that's what it looks like. But the reason I like this bait is that it falls straight down. There's no twist on it. So when you mark them on your graph and you have 3/8 or a 1/2 ounce you want to get down, it's going to go straight down, with your drop shot, and it's not going to twist as it goes down and take longer to get down there.
Okay.
And it really works. It's soft floating plastic. And it looks ridiculous. I do a couple sports shows a year. Guy bought some one year, and he comes back to my booth next year. And he's like, those baits you sold me last year? I was like, yeah. He's like, as soon as I left your booth, I was like, man, Simonton got me. Those things aren't going to catch a fish. He's like, man, I caught a bunch of fish on them. So
sure. So for the listeners, that bait really was streamlined, and then it had, I guess, the tail of the plastic was more of a circle or a ball. You could say
it's just a little ball.
A ball.
It resembles like a goby because it's got a little fatter head, but I just kind of want to resemble the tail.
Sure.
Of a goby, that round, because when it's on its profile side, you don't really notice it.
Yep.
I've got a couple of eyeballs on the side of it, but
I
don't know what you think, Travis, but I think for smallmouth fishing, I think simple is better. It seems like I catch more fish with subtle baits versus baits where they have tons of action on them. And I know that that changes for sometimes, but it seems like largemouths can get on more action baits, plastics for drop shotting. But I do real well with drab style baits, with not a lot of action.
All right, Michael, that was pretty cool. A lot of good information. I really appreciate you coming on. You're welcome back anytime. and good luck in the future.
Hey, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I really do.
Until next time, guys, we'll see you on the water.
Thanks so much for listening today. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show and follow us on Instagram at SmallmouthCrush. Also, the YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and comment with a review below. And as always, until next time, we'll see you on the water.